All right, we are live.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rick Jennings. I'm the chair of the Race, Equity, and Inclusion Working Group, also the chair of SACOG Board and a council member for the proud city of Sacramento. I want to thank you for joining us today. And before we jump into the meeting and our introductions, we do have some housekeeping to do. And we are waiting for one more member in order to have a quorum. So I'm going to ask Lynette to start the process of taking roll and sharing any updates that she has for us. And hopefully by that time, our last board member will join us so we can have a quorum to move forward. Lynette?
Sure. Thank you, Chair Jennings. Good afternoon, everyone. We're glad that you've been able to join us. If we have members of the working group who'd like to comment or ask questions throughout the meeting, we ask that you use the raise hand feature just so we can keep comments organized. And as well, our members of the public or interested parties who are observing and watching today, we welcome you. And if you have a public comment that you would like to make, we also ask that you use the raised hand feature. Additionally, we ask, as always, that you mute any device that you might be observing from so that we don't have any crossover from background noise. I can go ahead and take roll, and then hopefully we'll have our final member for quorum here. We'll start with our members of the SACOG board. Director Clark Kretz.
Here.
Gallardo.
Here.
Gog. Absent. Guerrero. Absent. Middleton.
Here.
Zaragoza.
Here.
Chenier. Absent. Soon. Absent. Vice Chair Frericks.
I am here.
Chair Jennings.
Here.
Thank you. And moving to our external working group members, we'll start with Elisa Herrera.
Here.
Heather Hostler.
I'm here.
Thank you. Chet Hewitt. Absent. Eileen Jacobs.
Here.
Holly Nickel. Absent. Debbie Odo Kent.
Here.
Christine Tien. Absent. And Joshua Wood. Absent. So unfortunately, we are still waiting for that last member. For members of the working group, we can't start the meeting until we have a quorum, which would allow this meeting to be held remotely. So that's why we're waiting. Chair Jennings, it's up to you if you want to continue to wait a few minutes to see if someone's able to join us.
Well, the other option would be what?
Hey, Chair Jennings, I just want to let you know, just heard from Director Guerrero, who will be with us shortly, she promises. So.
Okay.
We
Okay,
have-
so that will give us our quorum. I'm just trying to figure out, James, if you can help us to figure out what we may be able to do in moving forward while we wait for the quorum.
Mr. Chair, I think if I can go ahead with that. I think one thing that we could start with is to hear from AJ Tendick, who's one of our staff presenters. So not have any board discussion until that point, but at least get underway so that we're now public and streaming this. We could then go back to the items that we need to vote on to start the remote meeting. That'd be one way to proceed, or we can wait for Director Guerrero.
Okay. So that would be under public communications?
I believe AJ has an.
No, that would be in the blueprint engagement.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Well, let me just tell you a little bit of background before we get into that, and then I'll bring AJ in, and I'm trying to buy a little time in that process. So it's been a year since we had the opportunity to check in, and it's been a little over a year before this whole working group got started. And I don't know if you guys all remember the first meeting that we had. We had a meeting where I asked each of you to give me a word or phrase that defines success in the working group. Maybe most of you remember that because we started it with a brick wall, if you remember. But I wanted a word or a phrase that defines success for this working group. And you all were able to create a picture of success. If the staff has that, I'd love for them to put it up so you can all see it today.
We do have that, Chair Jennings, and I think Renee, our tech support, will get that ready to put up on the screen.
Okay, so while she's putting that up, what I'd like you to do is kind of as a check-in today, just doing a check-in. I think we're still able to do that without having a quorum. Just as a check-in, if you could take a look at that, and some of you remember the word that you used or the phrase that you used. Some of you remember what you put up there, and maybe some of you like me don't remember the word that you put up there, and a few of them look like the word that you put up there. But what I really wanted you to do today was, as a part of your check-in, is to introduce yourself and the city that or jurisdiction that you represent, and then tell us which one of these words resonates with you the most. And it doesn't have to be your brick. It could be any of these words, and or maybe it's a new word that resonates with you that we should add to our brick. And so why don't we just kind of go through that real quick, if you will. Lynette, you'll call each person and we'll get it started.
Sure, I could do that. And also, Chair Jennings, just for the record, we can note that Director Guerrero has joined us. So we do have a quorum.
Okay.
If you want to take action just really quickly, I can introduce the remote meeting item, and we could do that. And
Let's do that. Let's do that.
Okay.
Let's get that out the way so we're not walking on eggshells.
Perfect. That sounds great. So this item before the working group is our typical item that just allows this meeting to be held remotely. Statutes in the legislation require that to take place. So this is an action item. And if you could please indicate your vote when I call your name, I'd appreciate it. We'll start with Director Clark-Kretz.
Yes.
Gallardo,
Yes.
Gog, absent. Guerrero,
Yes.
Middleton,
Yes.
Zaragoza,
Yes.
Chenier, absent. Soon, absent. Vice Chair Frerichs,
Yes.
Chair Jennings,
Yes.
and then Avital Barnea, absent. Carolyn Coleman, absent. Elisa Herrera,
Yes.
Chet Hewitt, absent. Heather Hostler,
Here.
could you indicate your vote?
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Thank you. Holly Nickel, absent. Debbie Odokind,
Yes.
Christine Tien, absent, and Joshua Wood, absent. And the item carries with majority vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, we'll go back to our check-in real quick and throw the slide up on the brick again so they can see that. And they can see which one of the words resonates with them the most today, right now, in this time, in this space, while we're here today, whether it's the same word or a different word.
Okay,
more.
I'll call out members, sure.
Okay.
Director Clark-Kretz, you're up again.
Okay. I remember this very well. My word was welcoming, and I was, sorry, from the town of Loomis. I remember feeling really, the thought was the welcoming is not just welcoming, but welcoming the talk about this discussion, which is so important. And I think looking at these different words, the continued engagement really resonates with me. And I've think that it's super important. And I actually can't wait for this meeting to see how everybody thinks about the work that was put in for our draft. So anyway, that's me. And I'm in.
Welcome, welcome. Okay, so you
and
guys all got to remember that you got to say I'm in at the end, and then our job is to welcome you into this space.
Director Gallardo,
Thank you. Represent the city of Rockland, and my word was awareness. I really think that is where everything has to start, is that ability to be aware and acknowledge. One of the things I've shared before that I am so proud about Rockland is when it was founded, this was a very diverse city with families like ours coming from Spain, the Finnish families, Japanese, Chinese, Irish. It was very much a diverse community, and I'm pleased to see that some of that's coming back, but I think a lot of that is awareness of each other and where we came from and our journey.
And I'm in.
And I'm in.
Welcome.
Great. Next up is Director Guerrero.
Good afternoon, everybody. I just want to say this process has been quite quite impressionable on the amount of patience and just increased awareness that I've gained from others, and the goal to continue to move towards unity and progress has made an impression on me. And I've built more relationships, offline, so that we can continue this dialogue and see what we can do in our own city, because it's just inspired me to see what we can do to make those contributions now in West Sacramento. And so excited to see what we can do to maintain this progress. And I'm in.
Welcome.
Director Middleton, it's your turn.
Hi, Portia Middleton, City of Citrus Heights. And I can't remember what my word was, but what resonates at this moment is action steps. And I feel like going through this process, we've really kicked up some momentum and defined some true action that can be taken no matter where we are in our local jurisdiction in the process. We can really work forward and move forward with that. And I'm in.
Welcome.
Director Saragosa.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. Michael Saragosa, City of Placerville. I too don't remember what my word was, but the word that's sticking out to me today is normalize. And I think it normalize in the sense that, I always laugh because, I've been in campaign jobs for so long, and I remember back, being like a coalition director or Latino outreach director. And it was always like, they had that box had to be checked. But it wasn't, it wasn't. Nowadays, it's much different. And we talk about, this is just part of what we do. It's been normalized. It wasn't like, oh, we have to do this thing over here and you check the box. It's the normalization of how we do things and how we look at our ethnic constituencies within our state. And so to me, I think normalize has been a big part of this journey, and just for everyone to understand that. And, I look back at Placerville, and as Jill said, Placerville was a much more diverse community back during the gold rush, from Mexicans, Chileans, African-Americans, Chinese, that all came, for that American dream at the time of striking it rich during the gold rush. And then really the demographics changing over time as the gold rush sort of boom died. And we're seeing that demographic change within the city. You're seeing more diversity, and it's great to see. So again, for me today, it's normalized, and I'm all in.
Welcome, Michael.
Vice Chair Frericks.
Yes, Lucas Frericks, Mayor of the City of Davis. So good to see you all this afternoon. Feels like it's been too long. The word that I think or words that are most resonating with me today are action steps as well. Really so grateful to be at this place where we've, had a lot of buildup, and now we're really starting to see some real concrete action steps being taken. And with that, I'm all in.
Welcome, Lucas.
Chair Jennings, I'll skip you and let you have the last word if that's okay. We'll go on to Elisa Herrera.
Thank you. Transformative thought leaders resonates with me simply because that's what I believe we're here for. And I think this whole process has been an immense education for me, learning a lot about the planning world, and of course, all the historical discrimination and racism that we've experienced in the past and unfortunately still experience today. And I think it takes transformative thought leaders to make that change. And I am all in.
Welcome.
Heather Hostler.
Hi, everyone. I don't recall my word either. I keep going through it and said, maybe that was my word, but I couldn't swear to it. I would say those that are resonating with me today are action steps and transformative thought leaders. I think we continually have to be pliable and thinking about the moment and not feeling like here's our plan, it will be this forevermore, but being able to really be responsive as things change. So I think that takes transformative thought leaders and really wanting that to feel like this isn't a one and done process, but ongoing and thoughtful and intentional.
And I'm in.
And I'm all in.
Welcome.
Eileen Jacobs.
Oh, here I am. What am I supposed to do? Remind me, pick a word.
Tell me the word that resonates with you today, even if it's not the word that you picked in the beginning.
Well, since I don't remember what I picked in the beginning, I'll tell you one that resonates with me today, and it might be one that I picked in the beginning, which is access. And to me, access means people who are historically and typically underrepresented, having access to local government, to state government, to land use and planning and transportation planning, and ensuring that their voices are heard.
Are you in?
Oh, yes, I'm in.
Welcome.
Debbie Odo-Kent.
Good afternoon, everybody. Debbie Odo-Kent, I'm with the Health Education Council. And I mean, I love these words that are, I think it's fitting. It's on a brick wall because for many of us who've been working on equity issues for many, many years, it's often felt like we were trying to break down a brick wall. So I had to have these words listed, symbolically on that. I feel like these words really set our intention for how we were going to approach this work together, and the process by which we were going to move forward. So, like others, I think for me, I wanted our work together to be very focused on what actions we're going to take, and in thinking about how that could really be transformative in the long term. So I love these words because all of them, because it really, I think we have collectively as a group and under the leadership together have really embodied so many of these words up on this wall. And I'm very in.
Welcome. Welcome.
And Chair Jennings, we're back to you.
Okay, thank you very much. You guys have said it all. You said it much better than I could ever say it. I think, and with that said, I am fulfilled and I'm happy. I'm fulfilled and I'm happy because of the awareness that I hear from each one of you in your voice, that we are evening the playing field, that we're doing it in unity and we're making progress, that we're exhibiting the patience that we all need in order to be intentional, in order to be sustainable, in order to continue engaging in the process that will move us forward from where we know we should have never been. And we're doing it all in love. And so to me, a lot of these words mean so much in the fight to make sure that we even the playing field. So I love the words that we have up there. I don't think I heard a whole lot of different words, but if we did, we can add them to our foundation so that we can continue to move forward and make the progress that we've been making, that we all know we have to make, and not leave the next generation in the position that we've seen past generations go forward with. So with that, I'm in. And the church said,
Welcome.
there you go. There we go. All right. All right. That's a saying that we use in our church. Let the church say. Okay, so thank you so much for doing that. I think that helps us to move forward. Today is our 6th meeting, and we have 2 more meetings after this. We're working on moving SACOG forward towards a racially equitable and inclusive organization. This working group, as you remember, had 3 outcomes to achieve: to develop a racial equity statement of change and commitment, to prioritize racial equity in the long-term transportation and land use plan, and to build support among key stakeholders and board members and provide direction for a racial equity plan. To date, we have put in a lot of work. Give yourselves a round of applause for the amount of work that you've done. It's been a lot of work, and that we all have done in getting this done to this point. We've had some level setting conversations. We've had many uncomfortable conversations. Some people have described it to me as growth and collective learning conversations. But I want to let you know that I'm proud of the group for accomplishing the first of our outcomes. We created a racial equity statement of change and commitment. As you remember, we did that for SACOG, and the SACOG board unanimously adopted it, right? So I know we're all proud of that, but it's not the end. It's not the end to this work. It's not the end to our work. The next thing that we're working on is turning this statement into action. You can all know that you can have any plan that you want, and it can be organized, as well organized as it can be. But if you don't move it to action, it's just a plan that's on a sheet of paper. And so our job is to find a way to make sure that we turn that statement into action. And that's why we're meeting today. So with that, I would like to bring up the first item today is our carryover from the last meeting, which is SACOG's public engagement for long-term transportation and land use plan. We're calling it the blueprint, which I know you've heard that before. What we're looking for today is your input to make this public engagement plan prioritize racial equity. And I've got AJ Tendick, who will present this item, and he will do a much better job of presenting it than I've done. So I'm going to bring up the expert in the field that's going to present the item. AJ, will you take it away?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the introduction. I'm SACOG's communications team manager, and as far as background, I've worked on MTPs and blueprints since about 2006 on the communications teams in and around them. And so I'm very excited to help lead this effort this year, or this cycle, and to get some feedback from you all to really help us understand, if we're on the right track to really sort of meeting our stated goals. And I know this will tie in very directly to your next item on the action plan. But as it is, we were working on this, for the last year or so. And so we're been working on developing this, and it happens to play very well with the action plan. And so there would be some sort of tie-ins there officially. But I wanted to just make one kind of note on the type of input that we really look for on the blueprint, which is our name for the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, is that really SACOG doesn't build things on the ground, whether that's housing or restaurants or the roads that we drive on or ride our bikes on. We really implement the visions of our local cities and counties. And so when we go out for feedback on our long range plan, we really focus on sort of that long range vision, as opposed to like, do you like an interchange here, or would you like a bike lane explicitly right in this one spot? We talk more broadly, so how do we grow as a region? What are your priorities? What do you like about it? What do you value? Whether that's, the open space, or that you have options in terms of how you get around. And it's important that we look at the ultimate outcomes for that. So sometimes if you ask people something too granular, of course, everyone likes free parking and everyone likes uncongested highways. But unfortunately, that doesn't necessarily always work out if you add up all of the other inputs. And so a good example of that is, say, like Midtown in Sacramento. If the Midtown in Sacramento was covered with surface parking lots and big backyards, it wouldn't be the vibrant sort of commercial hub that it is. So that's just one sort of example on how we need to ask slightly bigger picture questions. But then that also makes it very difficult for people to sort of think 30 years out. And so the way that we want to approach that this year, which is not too dissimilar to how we've done it in cycles past, is we want to really focus on working with community-based organizations. And so we've modeled this from the original Blueprint era. During that time, we partnered with Valley Vision, who then went to work with the CBOs directly. And so we're going to be doing a very similar effort, except managing it ourselves this time, is we will very shortly put out an RFP for or I guess it's an RFQ for qualifications. We'd like to qualify as many community-based organizations as we can. And that will enable us to then pay them directly for their work that they might already be doing in the community. And so we're very aware that CBOs are very overburdened, and if we are asking them to do sort of additional work, that may or may not actually always work out from their staffing standpoint. So we want to try to tap into systems that they already have, networks that they already have, and really share some of the things that we would like to do. So a little bit of education on kind of long-range regional planning, and then gather some input through them through a survey. But then that RFQ process will also help us to sort of institutionalize that type of work. So other programs at SACOG. So looking backwards, like the Trails Plan, for example, could have used those folks that we've got qualified, or a funding round if we wanted to go seek community input on a funding round in the future, something like that. So that's one of the ways we're working both on this blueprint outreach as well as just sort of institutionalizing this sort of work at the agency. And so while community input is amazing, sometimes a little bit more scientific based polling is also appropriate. And so this year we're actually partnering with Valley Vision. They have a series of polls that they're already working through Sac State to implement. And so we're partnering with them on their upcoming built environment poll, working in partnership with them to help sort of develop those questions to ensure that they tie back to this polling that we've done for the last 20 years, starting with Blueprint, on how people sort of what they value and how they'd like to see the region grow, excuse me. And then one of the other tools that we're going to be using is surveying. And so we're going to be doing that both directly ourselves through our outreach and through like social media and our networks electronically, as well as really using the CBO partners, as one of the ways to sort of distribute that and incentivize that type of survey. One other method that we're going to be looking into is focus groups, which are smaller groups that allow us to get a little bit more in-depth conversations. You end up paying for people's times, and so they're more apt to sit with you for an hour than trying to get someone to fill out a survey in the middle of their busy day. And so we will do our best to make sure that those are both geographically and race and ethnic diverse, to make sure that we're getting a broad spectrum of input. And then what we have been doing for the last couple cycles of our long-range plan is pop-ups, and that we kind of show up to community events that are already occurring. For example, we've shown up at the Mobile Food Truck Fest in Woodland. We've shown up to Elk Grove's Community Day event. We've been to the Oak Park Farmers Market. So we're meeting people in places where they already are going to, in their neighborhoods. And the booth that we bring does not necessarily look like a government booth where we have pamphlets and we try to just like send you something and put you on your way. We really have focused on something that's a little bit more interactive. We bring activities for kids to do so that their parents can have a minute to fill out a survey and talk with us, which is actually a lot of fun. We get to do a lot of temporary tattoos and that sort of thing, and coloring books. So that one will come in the later stages, and the rest of the stuff that I've explained is really happening sort of almost starting right now, as we'll really start launching this stuff very soon through the winter. And that is the overview of kind of our public outreach that we're doing. We're also doing a ton of staff-to-staff work. Before we bring things to our board, their staff has seen this stuff and sort of vetted a lot of the technical data, that sort of thing. And one thing that we have flagged to be very important too is our board only represents about 20% of the elected officials in our region. So we wanted to make sure that while we have some state mandated elected official outreach, it comes a lot later in our planning period. And so we wanted to make sure that we make a round of meetings as much as we can, make presentations to the boards and councils in the region to really just sort of, open the door, make sure that they know who we are, that we have an open line of communication if they want to reach out further. There's not a lot of time in those meetings to get a ton of feedback, but there is some availability for feedback, and we can certainly, if they want to flag some priorities or some issues for us, we can follow up on that. So those have already started. We saw the YOLO Board of Supervisors just the other day, and we're going to go to Elk Grove next week. And so I think we have about 15 of those scheduled right now, and are working on getting as many of our 28 jurisdictions on the books as we can. So that is the, as fast as I can, overview of what we're doing for Blueprint outreach. And I'd love it if you had any input broadly or specific to the work of this this group.
So AJ, I think the thing I just wanted to make sure that what we're asking for them is their input on this public process, this engagement process that we have, to make sure that this plan prioritizes racial equity. And we want to know from them what's missing from this outreach approach, what maybe needs to be adjusted, and who does SACOG need to work with in order to make sure that this is reaching those who we need to reach. So tell me if I'm on board with those three things.
That's perfect. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And so I want to kind of open it up to everyone here because he's told us about the Valley Vision Partnership, the focus groups, the surveys, the pop-ups, making sure we understand what people value, all the public outreach that's already been done. Now the question is what's missing from this outreach approach? What needs to be adjusted? What could we do better? And who does SACOG need to work with that we have not identified? And that's what we need your input from right now.
Chair Jennings, Elisa Herrera has her hand raised.
Please, you called on him because you can see him. You can see everybody. I can only see 9 of you guys.
I just have a question on the public workshops. I see that you have 8 going. Are any of them in other languages besides English?
So those workshops will be those pop-up events, and those are, excuse me, one of our legally sort of required ones that we do. And so those are like 1 in each county and multiple in Sacramento County, just given the population size there. So we have a lot of time to adjust how we actually implement that. So that's a good feedback. Thank you on. So I guess the short answer is not yet, but probably should be.
Okay, good question, Elisa. What else? Who else?
Director Clark Kretz has her hand raised.
Yeah, thank you. As I was reading the Blueprint Public Outreach, Education, and Engagement, it actually doesn't mention our Racial Equity Action Plan in it at all. And I'm wondering if it should have some sort of a, reference to our goals in just even discussing this.
I think that's a great point. I do.
Yeah, some of it is the work that we've done on modeling what our outreach plan is was done prior to the work of the actual action plan. However, now that we're sort of catching up on that, I think it would be a very great addition to sort of incorporating that into this plan. And some of it too is that this plan is, the document anyway, is a little bit of not a one-off, but it's a little bit of a one-off item to this particular group. And so it's not necessarily all encompassing, and all of the other total work, like a lot of that staff to staff level work that we've done, is incorporated into another document. So I think what we'll do is probably take our outreach plan that went to the board, the more full one, and incorporate this and any feedback, including the references to the plan.
Yeah, it seems appropriate that we could include that in almost every one of your paragraphs. Thank you.
Great catch. Who else has a hand up?
Eileen Jacobs is next with her hand raised.
Okay.
Thank you. I would just like to emphasize again, and I know it's been said, but how critical language access is, and language access in advance of whatever is planned, whatever outreach activity is planned, whatever local jurisdiction activity is planned. There has to be outreach to local community-based organizations in order to ensure that you're reaching typically underserved populations, and in particular in multiple languages.
Language access in multiple languages. Gotcha.
Debbie Odo Kent has her hand raised.
Yeah, I appreciate the comment about making this very clear and intentional link between the REI action plan, particularly those around community engagement, since they very specifically kind of call out different segment, racial inclusion. So I appreciate the comment made earlier about that, and reinforce that. I have a question about this. There's a reference to a workshop in a box concept. I'm not 100% sure what that means. And I'm just wondering, one, I want to know what that is. And secondly, is the idea then that a whole variety of community-based organizations who have trust, history, relationship, and reach with various racial, ethnic, underserved groups throughout, the SACOG geographic area, they would then be engaged to increase participation in survey and data collection. And so their expertise will be used to identify those specific segments of the population that perhaps aren't historically engaged in this kind of survey or assessment activity. Is that correct?
Yeah, we wanted to be, like I said, I mentioned earlier, we wanted to be just respectful of their current workload and ability to really serve, probably this onslaught of government agencies that are seeking input from them, and wanted to make it as easy as possible to really lower that barrier. And so the way that we had thought to do that was to sort of provide this box of materials that would help support sort of like some background and education, to be able to understand what this long range plan is, and so that they could take that and then in multiple languages, take that out to their communities to do exactly as you said, to sort of broaden and deepen the group that we're reaching.
One suggestion, I don't know if this is part of the plan, but in planning kind of the contents of that workshop in the box, it might be really helpful to have some of those community-based organizations at the beginning of that process, as opposed to being handed the workshop in the box, with the information and the content kind of pre-populated, but to understand that often the framing, the cultural nuances of the messaging, obviously in language kinds of dynamics would be important as well.
That's a great idea. Thank you.
Chair Jennings, I don't see any other hands raised.
Okay. So we want to make sure that anyone that has any concerns or needs clarification, or wants to share, this would be the opportunity to do so. And also want to let you know that if you come up with something after this meeting and you want to get that to on paper, you can give feedback through Lynette or AJ directly at any point in time. So if you come up with, you wake up in the middle of the night and says, oh, I knew I should have said this, you know, it came to you at that last minute. My wife says I talk in my sleep and I talk about business all the time. So, you know, those things come up late at night. And I said, I just asked her to put a recorder on me so I can remember some of it, because, you know, you don't always remember what you dream about. But anyway, if you're not like me, you know, call either Lynette and or AJ and you can tell them anything you want to tell them. I just want to make sure, you know, you have that option. Okay. But just want to make sure everybody has the opportunity to voice any concerns, any clarification, anybody else that we need to be working with, SACOG need to be working with that we're not working with right now, anything need to be adjusted and or in missing any kind of critical outreach approach that you can think of.
Thank you, Chair. I want to just mention too that it is a living document. There are some legal requirements that we have in terms of what our minimums are, but we're certainly striving to do much more than what the minimums are. And so if there are things that come up that are either changes or ideas or more groups that we can work with, we're certainly happy to incorporate that as best we can.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. No hands. We good? You guys ready to move to the next item? Good, good, good. So thank you, AJ. Appreciate your presentation. And we're going to move to our last item today, which is to review the working draft racial equity action plan. And I've got two of our incredible resources here, Casey Lazan and Shanice Alexander, who are going to walk us through this item. Casey's going to give opening remarks, and she's going to just do a great job and hand it off to Shanice at some point in time during the presentation. And they're going to do that as soon as I shut up and stop talking. So I just want to let you know you're in good hands, much better hands than you are when I'm talking and doing what I do. You're in good hands, and I want to turn it. Jim, did you have anything before we turn it over to them? Okay, with that said, nod of his head, I'm going to stop talking. Casey, take it away. I have the utmost confidence in the two of you.
Thank you, Chair Jennings. It does take a team to do all of this work. So
what does team stand for?
Together, everyone achieves more.
Go, girl, do it.
Thank you. Hey, I listen and learn. I'm trying.
Good stuff. That's good stuff.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. On behalf of SACOG staff and our wonderful racial equity advisor, Shanice Alexander, Patrick Brown could not be here with us today. We are pleased to present to you a working draft racial equity action plan. This is very, very much a working draft. If you have been able to review it ahead of time, you will see that there are no dates yet in it. Some of the action steps are not filled out. We still have measures to create, and that is because it is truly working draft. So we are very interested in getting feedback from you today so that we can take it to the next stage of completion. What I want to say, we are going to walk through, in particular today, the goals and objectives in the action plan. And what we are seeking from you is feedback on that. And the questions are in your agenda, specifically, which goals and objectives are you most excited about? Which goals and objectives do you think will be the most challenging or controversial? What's missing from the goals and objectives? And then which eyes in 2023. We have also invited, you'll see with attendees that we have sent this to all of our stakeholders who we had invited to listening sessions. We invited them to attend today, and I believe some are here and may choose to share comments. And we are looking forward to both your feedback today, as well as from you and from our stakeholders over the course of the next month through August, to receive feedback, to have conversations about this so that we can use that really to work with, with you and with stakeholders to bring this to, again, the next draft that we will bring to you in September. And then before I turn it over to Shanice, I also just want to let you know that the staff team that put this together, they care very much about doing this. This was our first time doing a racial equity action plan, and we look forward to maintaining it. Rosie Ramos, Darren Conley, Katie Brunetti, Josiah Johnson, Sam Shelton, Tina Glover, Mike Rawson, and Rosana Montesinos. They're from all of the different management groups in our agency, and they are the team whose hands are giving this to you today. And Jessica Lee, who made it look beautiful for you. So with that, Shanice, Shanice is going to walk us through the findings from the listening sessions, as well as the process to create this plan. So I turn it over to you, Shanice.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Shanice Alexander. I'm one of the co-founders and principal consultants here at Venture with Purpose. We've been working with SACOG since around May, and we'll continue to support as you move through your racial equity action plan development process through the end of the year. And so I want to walk us through kind of an overview of everything that's gone on. Well, it's probably not even everything, but a lot of what's gone on over the last couple of months. And I know we want to leave space for you all to jump in. So I'm going to try to get through this as quickly as possible. If we can pull up those slides, I can jump right in. Just as another FYI, some of those slides are really text heavy. I'm not going to go through everything, but you do have a copy of the slides so you can take a look at, on your own time. So I'm going to walk us through, the findings from the stakeholder listening sessions, one-on-one interviews, and then talk a bit about the REA working group capacity building series. Next slide. Again, myself and my co-facilitator, Patrick Brown, who couldn't be here today with Venture with Purpose. You can go on to the next slide. And as an overview for the listening session, so I wanted to talk about the objectives. So we did 14 listening sessions, and the entire goal of those listening sessions were for stakeholders across both the region as well as within SACOG as an agency to share their experiences and identify strengths and barriers of previous and current collaborative efforts relating to SACOG's REI initiative policies and practices, right? And so stakeholders had the opportunity to really surface their priorities or what they think SACOG's priorities should be as you move forward in developing your racial equity action plan. Next slide, please. So here's an overview of the listening sessions. So between May 17th and June 22nd, again, we completed 14 total stakeholder sessions. You can see how many sessions we completed per stakeholder group. So city and county staff, SACOG staff and managers, transit agency staff, community-based organizations, and 4 agency prosperity partners. In total, we had about 83 attendees and participants in those listening sessions. Next slide, please. Here's a list of all the folks who participated, so you can get an idea who, provided input into the listening sessions, and then as that input being built into the racial equity action plan. So I'll just leave this here for a second so you can take a look at that. And then we can go to the next slide. The general findings fall into these categories. So regardless of the stakeholder, most of these issues came up in every listening session. So these were the main themes that we found. Number one was community stakeholder engagement. SACOG as an agency, so SACOG working on racial equity internally within their own staff, SACOG staff's capacity, knowledge, and skill around racial equity and inclusion, overall commitment to REI, so how committed does SACOG seem to be to racial equity and inclusion, board dynamics, historical structural inequities, SACOG's role in the region, and then shared language. So these are the main themes that we found across all of 14 listening sessions. Next slide. All right, so some trends. There were different trends per stakeholder group. For example, SACOG staff were really excited. They showed a lot of motivation and interest in actually incorporating racial equity and inclusion into the work. It was, depending on where they were located within the staff, what their roles were, there was a different level of knowledge of what SACOG has been doing over the previous year or so. If folks were mostly around programming or externally facing tended to have a better understanding or more knowledge of the activities that SACOG had been leading, as compared to those who are kind of further away from kind of forward-facing roles within the space. And so staff reported that even though the work feels slow, they were excited, right? And they also lifted up that the board of directors has made intentional strides toward acknowledging that this work is a priority for SACOG. So they were really excited to share that information. Next slide, please. As for community-based organizations and prosperity partners, which I've combined together here, the trends were that better resource organizations who tended to be located in larger cities or jurisdictions seem to be more aware of SACOG's specific REI efforts. This often was because they also are participating in their own REI efforts or are in shared spaces where conversations are happening. And also they have the capacity within their own organizations to move the work and hold the work as they move forward. Right. CBOs want to build and deepen relationships with SACOG. They want to see SACOG showing up at their activities, partnering with them, tapping into their work, as AJ has just discussed, tapping into the strengths and the work that's already happening in the communities. And they want a closer relationship with SACOG so that there's more alignment across the board. Next slide, please. The city and county staff, as well as transit agency staff, generally, they had a relatively high level of understanding of where SACOG's REI work was. Again, they often were working on their own REI issues. Again, those who were in larger, more diverse cities or jurisdictions seem to have a more direct experiences with REI work, and we're collaborating across the region in different ways to move that work forward. So similarly to the community-based organizations, these stakeholders communicated that they see SACOG really stepping in as an educator and convener, right? So there are a lot of identifiers and roles that SACOG could play, and these two specifically came up most often. There's a space for SACOG to gather resources to really standardize and normalize language around REI, as well as bring folks together to have those conversations that will build on the work as well as deepen relationships. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we're going to shift over to the working group one-on-one findings. And so within these findings, again, there's a lot of overlap. It's one big Venn diagram of shared understandings of where things are and where things, should be headed. And so folks thought that the Racial Equity Action Plan should be published, and SACOG should be transparent in the plan about when it's reviewed, how it's updated, and what metrics are going to be used, right? And so there's this call for more transparency around the process. Wanting to make sure that folks understand that this is, again, a working document. It's something that's going to change over time. And then it should be communicated to all stakeholders of the process when it's updated, or how progress is being made as you move forward in the work. And then equity outcomes should be measured and reported on, so SACOG and its stakeholders can assess the effectiveness of its internal equity efforts, right? So be very clear about the metrics that are being used to measure your progress, but then also report back on that. And this is under operations. Next slide, please. So within the programming focus, there's an emphasis that government in general and SACOG and its own program should work more intentionally to reach out and meaningfully engage underrepresented communities. Again, this community engagement piece that showed up in every conversation. There's also an interest in SACOG providing, creating, or otherwise enabling training for local government staff to do racial equity work and action planning across jurisdictions, right? So how can we standardize this experience and build up the capacity of everyone within the region to be able to hold this work for their specific experiences, but also have a shared understanding of the steps that you're doing to move forward and make sure this is incorporated into everything that you do. Also establishing baseline demographics. So there's a need to disaggregate a lot of data for race, ethnicity, and different identities, and really understand who is experiencing inequity and where. So really wanted to pull that information out. Next slide. And then under board practices, a sentiment that was shared was it's important that board members have scheduled time to learn about equity issues and best practices. The board needs to hear about equity issues and practices in order to make equitable decisions. So how is the board staying on top of being aware of what's going on in real time, as well as the historical impacts of policies and practices that may have created inequity or are continuing to perpetuate that inequity, right? And then build the board's capacity to implement the racial equity plan and consider how its decision-making processes address historic inequities. Training or orientation for new SACOG board members on SACOG racial equity work. So really a focus on formalizing a process for current board members as well as incoming board members to understand where SACOG's vision for equity is, right? What that actually looks like in the commitment to racial equity as you move forward. So is it trainings, creating space on agendas where you're having these conversations on a regular basis with some type of formalized process to make sure that this conversation continues. Next slide. All right, and really quickly, I'll wrap it up soon. Before we finish the listening sessions and the one-on-ones, we started to dive into some capacity building opportunities with the REI working group and the staff working group members. And so for this series, we really wanted to bring folks together to participate in a practical workshop series that outlined best practices for developing, implementing, and tracking outcomes that would be in the racial equity action plan, right? And so we tried to pull in practical examples of what's going on right now at SACOG within the region to help the team build out goals, objectives, actions, and then measures and metrics to actually track that work over time. And so we focused on that in three different sessions. Next slide, please. There are the dates for these 3 sessions, so they're about 2 weeks apart. The first session was really focused on developing a shared understanding of the purpose, outcomes, and process framework, which is a great tool to help teams think about aligning on their vision for creating a process, right? And so increasing understanding, building confidence, and improving communication in order to develop and implement that racial equity plan. The second session focused on strengthening skills to strategically develop measures and metrics of success for reaching REI goals. And so really focusing on building out your goals, your objectives, defining what those mean to you, how they differ, and then aligning that to the realities of how the work actually moves in real time. And then the third session focused on developing and understanding how to create and maintain a culture of accountability. And we did focus a bit more on developing those metrics and measures. So how are you actually going to measure your process? As far as the accountability piece is really about the culture piece. So how are you all as a working group working together to move this process forward? How are you holding each other accountable? What's the report back? How do we know that we're actually doing well or not doing well in this work? So we really wanted to focus on that in that conversation. Next slide, please. And so this is an overview of where we're headed, right? And so the remaining project timeline, August through December, we'll be working very closely with Casey, Eric, and their teams, the management teams, to really dive into some specific project-specific advising on how to incorporate equity into the work that's happening now, how to review RFPs, what's going to be the best approach for engaging community in different areas in that way, as well as creating more equitable procurement. Along with the capacity building series, I met with the REI staff who were working on this working group to really kind of answer questions and dive into more of the weeds where we couldn't get into that in those sessions. We were able to dive into the weeds and get more specific around how to actually move this process forward with developing that action plan. So this is where we are now and where we're going to be going in the next couple of months. Next slide. And that's all I have. So yeah, definitely. I don't know if we have time for questions or reflections, but I'll pause here and then let Casey take it.
Thank you. I actually would like us to pause here and see if there are any questions or reflections, because that was quite a lot that Shanice just shared with you. And it's a summary of all of the summaries in the action plan from the listening sessions.
I just have a question. What is a 4-agency prosperity partners? That was mentioned, and I don't know what that is.
Should I take that, Casey?
Yes, please.
Yeah, thanks, Elisa. Yeah, so since, well, about 5 years now, and there's been different incarnations of this, we are working with Sacramento Metro Chamber, Greater Sacramento Economic Council, Valley Vision, and the Sacramento Asian Chamber in particular. We brought the Brookings Institution out here about 4 years ago, did an economic sort of analysis of our region's economy, which, by the way, they said racial and ethnic disparities and outcomes and economic outcomes are like one of our Achilles heels as a region. And so the partners got together after that and developed a prosperity strategy across the 6 counties, which also doubles as our what's known as a SED. So it's one of at least several partnerships we have that are more formal. We have another one with some of our public agencies around zero emission vehicles and mobility as well.
I'm just pausing to first see if there are any other questions. I don't want to rush through that, but okay, then we will move on to the next part of this. So Renee, can you pull our slides back? Thank you so much. So now we're going to walk through their 3 focus areas of the action plan. So one of them is SACOG operations. So this is our human resources, finance, administration. Another is programs. Those are all of the external facing programs, projects and services that SACOG runs. And then the third will be board practice. We are going to, as I said, walk through goals and objectives. And what we'd like to do, and I'm sorry, I should back up here. So all of the learnings that we got from the listening sessions, what staff has attempted to do is take those and translate those into the action plan. So into the goals and objectives and the partial set of actions that you see there. That's what we're trying to do. So we were trying to, as best and authentically as we could, take it and turn this wisdom into the action plan. So what we're asking of you today, as our working group overseeing this, is the questions that you see here on the screen. So I just want to make sure that you have those in mind, and I'm going to flash them up, like we'll have them up here a lot. Which goals and objectives are you most excited about? Which ones do you think will be most challenging or controversial? What's missing from the goals and objectives? Like, what did we not catch from all of those listening sessions and needs to be in there? And which objectives should we prioritize in 2023? Because we will put a schedule to all of this, and we want to hear from you what should be prioritized. So with that, I will now turn it over to Eric Johnson. He will walk through our operations section of the read.
Thanks, Casey, and thanks, Shanice. I'm Eric Johnson, the Deputy Executive Director of Operations. And so what I want to do here is walk you through the 3 goals and just kind of highlight some of the objectives here. And as you've heard, these are really informed by what we've heard in the listening sessions. And in the area of operations, we have 3 goals, 2 of them of which are focused on the staff, and 1 is focused on our procurement, how we do business with the community. So if you can go on to the next slide. So our first goal here is to establish a safe and inclusive workplace for all current and future employees. So this is really looking at the experience of what people have while they're employees at SACOG. And we heard from members of this group and on our listening sessions about what are some of the best practices in trying to create an inclusive workplace. And we also, of course, listen to our staff to hear, what's important to them and what would they like to do. And so in this first goal, we're really focusing on training both for how to understand how to have how to equip staff with the tools to implement the rest of this racial equity action plan, but also to get a better understanding of what are the things to understand working with your peers and how to understand the different backgrounds that everyone's coming from. So if you can go on to the next goal, here we're focused a little bit more on the future. And so as we continue to grow our staff and we have staff turnover over time, we want to make sure that we're reducing barriers as much as possible for people coming in to work at SACOG. How do we enhance the diversity that we have? And how do we ensure that, as we've heard from some of the listening sessions and in our own discussions, people have a hard time seeing themselves work in a place that doesn't reflect them. And so we want to make sure that that we are clear about explaining the complicated work we do and seeing how people can see themselves with a career future at SACOG, but also looking at the things that we do where we are, going through the recruitment and outreach for hiring to ensure that we're not unintentionally putting up barriers ourselves to having people have fulfilling careers at SACOG. So that's what we're focused on in the second goal here. And then the third goal is focused on our procurement. And we do operate in a pretty complex environment with a lot of restrictions on us, but that shouldn't be an excuse for us looking at how to incorporate racial equity. And at the end of the day, really ensure that there's a way for businesses who want to have work with SACOG to not have artificial barriers between them and having opportunities to work with us. And so what you see here is we're really looking at one, understanding, are there things that we're doing that are maybe there's no reason to have barriers that are in place now? There's maybe more flexibility that we're giving ourselves permission for. And then two, to just better connect with the communities. And again, much like with staff, make it more explainable of what SACOG is doing and where there might be opportunities for businesses who may be unfamiliar with SACOG to have opportunities to work with us. So with that, open for feedback. Are there things that you'd react to based on what I just briefly went through in the operations area?
Chair Jennings, I see Elisa Herrera's hand up.
Lisa.
Thank you. I have made notes in the PDF file, a lot of comments, and I don't know if I should just send that to Lynette and you guys can look at that. I don't want to ask every one of them, but I do want to just bring up, I'm excited about all of these, but in particular, the training for member agencies. And of course, I think that's going to be the most challenging because of all the rules and restrictions and maybe the perspectives that some of them have or don't have that might not be shared by some of us. But in terms of operations, when I see under objective 1B, standardized training opportunities, the reality is that many people of color have not had the opportunities others have had. And so when you say standardized, it makes me think that you're not willing to provide specialized training to those who maybe have not had those learnings as others may have had. So I'm wondering if we could consider that. You do want to make a standard, and I understand the rule about, human resources and wanting to make sure everybody has the same opportunities, but some of them might need more support. And a lot of those people might be people of color. So we've got to consider that. And then I don't know if you want me just to go on or just leave it and go to goal number 2. You want me to continue?
Sure, please go. We'd love to hear your feedback today.
In goal number 2, we have the objective 2C. We say mitigate biases in hiring. And we also need to add promotions there as well, because too often we get people in the door, but we don't give them the opportunities to be promoted or don't support them in achieving that promotion that they want. So I just wanted to make a comment on that. And then regarding procurement, in my former life, I worked with an engineering firm, and I saw firsthand and experienced firsthand a lot of discrimination. And my question is, how can you, and I know you have rules, and I don't know how extensive they are. I'm sure they're pretty onerous, but how can you incorporate requirements that help member agencies find and contract with companies that have an equity plan, right? So how can you help to encourage that? Because too often we have maybe an engineering firm who tokenizes a business that's a person of color, owns that business, and they tokenize them by giving them 5% because that's what's required. So they give them the nominal, here, you can make all the copies for me. And in the meantime, I'm going to continue giving these subcontracts for engineering to people that I know who look like me, right? So that happens all the time, and that's maddening. And so we need to figure out how can SACOG provide some sort of specialized training to member agencies who then require a little bit more from consultants to do better than they have been. And that's all I have.
Great job, Elisa. Good job.
We would love your comments and anybody else who wants to send them in to Lynette. We're taking those all the way through the month of August, and that'd be really helpful, as much details you have. Thank you so much.
Lynette, do you see any other hands up as it relates to operations?
Yes, Debbie Odo Kent's hand is raised.
Okay.
Hi, so first let me say that I really like the way this really flows out of the actions and commitments that were embedded in the statement, and even the noting of kind of where the priorities push, the priority of the goal and objective around listening, planning, and supporting. You did a really great job of kind of pulling it all together and helping us understand from kind of start to finish, or as part of the action plan, how this really flows from the statement that this work group spent a fair amount of time, constructing. And I know that, you said this is the first draft, and our job is to kind of look at the high level goals and then some of the specific objectives as they're written. And so my question is there plans then, as this is further developed, to actually put some targeted percentages for, for example, under procurement, like what is baseline and what is a goal that we'd like to attach to the goal about increasing the diversity of consultants, subcontractors, or those that are procured, if you will. And the same with, the staffing mix, and so that we just have a better understanding of where we are now. And after all these activities and objectives are implemented, like, are we meeting sort of the target or intention of what we hope by setting out these goals and objectives?
I can just briefly say for both the procurement and the staffing, establishing baseline data is critical, and that definitely be part of our first year actions to make sure we have an understanding of where we're at now, so we know kind of what's a reasonable goal to set going forward.
Not to throw cold water on anything, but I think you'd also have to be careful as a government agency that we don't run afoul of Prop 209, because it's still the California law, so it has to be done in a way that doesn't run afoul of that, as we're looking at those numbers.
Yeah, both Prop 209 as well as our federal affirmative action rules that through our federal funds through USDOT, we're going to be looking at. And that will take us some time, but we want to report back to this group and the board next year about what we are able to do and talk more about that.
Lynette, any other questions on operations?
I'm not seeing any other hands raised.
And Eric, you say you're available to take any other questions directly?
Yeah, absolutely. If you have written comments, but also, Casey and I are available. If you want to talk more about operations, be happy to meet with people this month, both members of the committee, but also anybody listening in who has feedback.
Great, great. Okay, so then Casey, are you ready to go to programs or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I am. Thank you very much. And thank you for the comments we've received so far on operations. Really, they're very, very helpful. Okay, moving on to programs. So as Shanice said, a major theme we heard in the listening sessions was engage community representatives, learn what their perspectives are, learn their experience. And so our first goal for programs is to engage community representatives of Black, Indigenous, Asian, Pacific Islander, Hispanic, Latino, and communities of color, along with low-income, rural, urban, and other underrepresented communities to help shape SACOG's projects and programs. So the three objectives that are there to help us support us in getting to that goal have to do with investing in and strengthening partnerships with community representatives. That was just another very clear, I mean, this goal and the objectives pretty much wrote themselves because of how clearly this came through in our findings and all of the learnings we had. For the second objective there, 1B, calls out our 2024 blueprint plan explicitly. That's the project that AJ described to you the engagement for. And that's called out here because it's the biggest project that SACOG does. We update it every 4 years. It sets our work program really, because it's a 20-year plan, it sets it for 20 years, but there's so much like on a 4-year cycle that we do. And so we're trying to make sure that as we run into the update of that plan, that we really integrate it with the Racial Equity Action Plan and the goals and objectives. So that's why it's called out explicitly. And then finally, we have an explicit objectives related to engaging with tribal governments, because if you will recall from when we last met, we said tribal governments in this region are one of our stakeholder groups, and we have been trying to connect with them, but we will admit SACOG's work with tribes has been on this 4-year cycle for blueprint update, and it has not, it's been pretty transactional. And so what we need to do, and we understand, is we need to work much harder to engage them just outside of that. And so we just listed that explicitly here so that it's something that we can focus time and attention on. Next slide, please. And then our second program goal is to increase funding for programs and projects that prioritize race equity and inclusion and or specifically engage underrepresented and underserved communities in the region. Again, this flows from the very strong call for SACOG to engage with communities, in the communities. And so this, again, this goal was pretty obvious coming out of the learnings. What we have identified, we've taken some of the things that we've already started doing based on the learnings we've had from this working group. The first objective here, 2A, we want to formalize a long-term commitment in our blueprint to fund the Engage, Empower, Implement program. That is our grant program to fund local governments to do planning in partnership with communities. So we have a pilot right now, and we want to be able to formalize that program. Another is to invest in leadership and talent pipelines. We also heard a lot of that. I think this really overlaps a lot, both with SACOG's own operations, as well as with just the local agencies and all of the governments in our region to invest in that. For example, continuing our Youth Leadership Academy, forming stronger partnerships with professional organizations and other organizations that really can bring in more diversity into the professions that do the work in the sphere of SACOG. And then lastly, evaluating SACOG's programs and planning work. to identify opportunities to increase racial equity and reduce disparities. This came out of, again, that engagement is just understanding how are our programs working right now, and how can we change them over time to really to make them for our actual work, translating community engagement into the work to reduce disparities. Next slide, please. And then finally, our third goal in programs is again, pretty much wrote itself, SACOG supports and learns from member and local partner agencies, incorporating racial equity best practices into their planning work. This is, we obviously heard very loud and clear that local agencies see that SACOG could be an educator and convener, but we also heard that our local agencies are on all different tracks of their own racial equity work. And so there's a lot that we can learn from many of our government partners. And so all of the goal here and the objectives are really about collaborating with them and learning with them over time, learning from successes and failures and evaluating that together. Next slide, please. With that is an overview of the goals and objectives for programs. So we're very interested to get your feedback on these.
Lynette, anything?
Yes, we have Director Clark Kretz with her hand raised and Director Soon.
Thank you. Yeah, going back to the very last slide that you were talking about, and specifically historical mistakes that have been made in the past, which is something that I was going to bring up too under the board of directors too. I think it's hugely important to remember what history has done and the mistakes that we've made in the past. And I feel like that should be incorporated into the programs to educate everybody, not just the board. So I really feel like it should be part of the program as well. And then, don't want to go forward, but I think it should be a little bit more specific when we get to the board of directors. So I'll wait to comment on that. Thanks.
And Darren.
Thank you, Chair Jennings. Yeah, I just want to, take the moment to commend staff and everybody on here for all the hard work that's gone into this. Just want to acknowledge the comment, Casey, about the tribal, and I know we've had some challenges reaching to the Wilton Rancheria tribe, and I had a conversation with Renee, and so that effort is still ongoing, and I've talked to Chairman Tarango, and he's willing to meet. He's just got back from being out of town, so it's and you may all know it's the Sky River Casino is opening very soon, so there's a lot of things on their plate right now. So I just want to say that it's not for a lack of wanting to. They're just really busy.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Not seeing any other hands raised.
Yeah, I think I just want to make a point on the Casey's point on collaborating and working together on REI plans. That probably is one of the things that really makes the most opportunity for me to see if we can take all these different jurisdictions who are working on some form of racial equity plan and see if we can really work together in a way that benefits the entire region and benefits each organization and jurisdiction. And I keep trying to figure out in my mind, how do we take that BHAG and how do we really make it something that's effective and working and is not so time exhausting that it takes more time than we have to give it. But I think, to see that accomplished, as a part of this action plan, to me will be one of the biggest benefits that I see in this region, when we can all sit at the table and learn from each other and have some form of a some form of a group that meets on a regular basis and shares what they've learned from each other and continue to move their jurisdictions and their geographic areas forward. So I'm just excited about that. That's the thing that pumps me up the most, is that we become a learning community and we learn from each other, no matter where you are in the whole process. You know, whether you're at the beginning or whether you're at the end or in the middle, you know, we still, you know, each one teach one. No matter how far you are, we keep bringing others forward. So I'm excited about that. That goes back to my whole team concept, that we do achieve so much more when we work together. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that works out. Okay, any more questions to Casey before we move to James on board practice?
And just to reiterate, if you have other thoughts or other comments coming after this, please send them. You can send them to me directly. You can send them to Lynette. They will make it to the REI team.
Great, great. Okay, James, I think you're going to do on board practice.
I am indeed, Chair Jennings. Yeah, so I obviously have been thinking a lot about this for quite some time with many of you who are the board members on this working group. So it was really nice to do a deeper dive and sort of hear a little bit of the listening sessions and the feedback. So here we go. We've got 3 goals. Same as before with Casey and Eric. I'm just going to walk through these and then look for a lot of discussion and feedback. So number 1, I think it really kind of gets to this listen and learn as one of the big themes of our racial equity statement, but also of what's still ahead, which is really trying to get the board to deepen its understanding of disparities and inequities by race, ethnicity, by income, and by geography, by urban, rural. Again, kind of hearkening back a little bit to the statement, we recognize that there are many inequities beyond race, ethnicity, and there's some really important ones here, right, that have some, excuse me, intersectionality around income and geography. And how those really truly affect those ultimate outcomes of every single person who lives in the region. So what does that mean? It means agendizing regular topics, workshops at the board meetings, and hearing from speakers in the region and with outside of the region, specifically around equity issues, the historical inequities in the region. I've heard from a number of you, and I think Director Clark-Kretz just mentioned this as well, in terms of we have a very complex and in some ways very inequitable and unjust past. And as a somewhat newcomer to this region, I keep thinking that we all need to understand this better in terms of what came before, to understand what we're still tackling, what people still face now. So again, this could go one of many ways. And for all of you who are not on the board, we do a workshop typically every month at the board meeting. We usually spend 45 to 60 minutes. We do a deep dive. We like to have those on topics that are relevant to the board, but also in some ways coming up and in front of them. So it would be, we were trying to put something together already this year. We'll probably try to do this at the beginning of next calendar year around at least the history of the region through a sort of a race ethnicity lens. But also cultural literacy, understanding our remarkable diversity of cultures in the region. So there's many ways we could go with this. It is a thing we do at current practice, but we could infuse racial equity more into those sessions. Number 1. Second, we have a lot of new board members roughly every 2 years. We have a 31-member board. There are only 10 of them on this working group, but we get new members and fresh faces every year. So making sure that as we onboard new board members, that we do something that, and even open it up for returning board members, but do something to begin to sort of kick off the 1 to 2 year kind of SACOG board session and cohort, again, as a way to introduce the board or returning board members to the Race Equity Inclusion Working Group, to the Racial Equity Action Plan. And then finally, we do a lot of, with the board, since I've been here the last 5 years, we've done a lot of, as many of your board members know, study missions. We go and look at other competitor peer regions. We just went to Salt Lake City for a couple of days, but perhaps we could go within our region. Perhaps we could do something internal to the SACOG region to better understand some of the communities that frankly have been disenfranchised or not engaged that we need to do a better job of reaching out to. So those are 3 ideas into the first goal. So next slide. I think as all you know, and it was referenced in a lot of the comments and feedback on the Racial Equity Action Plan, I know that the board has spent a lot of time. We had the board retreat in April where you really had a deep dive into the triple bottom line, elevating equity to be on par with economy and environment. But also sort of how do we take the Racial Equity Action Plan and really make that part of the E for the equity E in our work. So a couple of ideas here in terms of objectives: invite community stakeholders to share their perspectives on a lot of the policy issues and the real decisions the board is making in advance of those policy decisions being made. And then trying to figure out some way of assessing the equity and racial equity impacts of proposed decisions and incorporating that into a regular staff analysis, as we would do, as many of you are familiar with, more recently around greenhouse gas emissions or access to jobs or traffic congestion. Can we take equity and racial equity and make it something that we can sort of infuse into our analysis as a regular practice? And then last goal, next slide. And I think we've heard this loud and clear. I know this came a lot out of the learnings as well, and the listening sessions, which is not to just do, and Chair Jennings, you said this, not to just do a plan, right, and have it sit there and gather dust, but making sure that we have consistent engagement with it, that we update the board consistently and frequently on progress reports more than just once a year. And secondly, I think this is a really interesting, I have to say, I think this is frankly one of the most interesting, productive, constructive working groups in my 5 years at SACOG, because I think of the mix of board members and a lot of our external partners who are so dedicated to this. What might this Race Equity Inclusion Working Group look like in the next 2 years to implement the Racial Equity Action Plan, right? Like, does it look like this? Does it have other folks on here? Maybe there's some local staff, local stakeholders, community-based organizations, right? If it's around implementation, might the REI Working Group the next 2 years be structured to set up some accountability around implementation? Even some of those are partners, right, in local government and local agencies who also are looking to be on this journey with us and implement. So just a thought from your staff on how we might actually look at the REI working group going forward after this calendar year. And I believe that's it. Yeah, so again, just a reminder on the questions. Would love to know what you're excited about. What do you think will be challenging, controversial, what's missing, and what might we prioritize starting in January? So thanks.
Thanks, James. And we'll take those questions right now and offer them to the board so that we can do this as it relates to board practice. Lynette, what questions do we have out there?
We've got Director Saragosa up first and then Director Clark-Kretz.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair and James. One thing I really liked what you said, James, was, maybe in addition to going to other locations around the country, but also looking, within our own jurisdictions for people to get a better understanding of just our neighbors and what's going on in those areas. I think especially because the last 2 years, we've essentially been virtual. And so you have board members that have only met maybe once or maybe twice, within that time, and they really haven't even gotten to know each other, and even less maybe so of the other jurisdictions. So I love that idea of doing that. And then I wasn't sure where to put this, but I ran into an old friend of mine, David DeLuce, who's now over at Caltrans. He's heading up the Civil Rights Division there. He used to be head of Urban League here in Sacramento. We worked together in the governor's office, but he's doing some great stuff over there. I know David really well. I know he's going to really push for whatever he can do for communities of color. And I didn't know if there's some place where maybe it's him coming to talk about what he's doing at Caltrans and how we can work together. Maybe as a guest speaker might be something really good to do. I'm happy to facilitate that. You all may be talking to him already, but wanted to throw that out there as well. Thank you.
That's a great suggestion, Mike. I know David personally. He's also a fraternity brother of mine, so don't hold that against him. But he's an incredible asset to the region. And if he's working on civil rights issues over at Caltrans or wherever you said he was,
Caltrans, yep.
Yeah, that can definitely benefit, us and certain jurisdictions within the region. So I know I'll send, you have his contact information. I think you can go ahead and send that to the staff.
Will do.
And you said Jan Clark Kretz? Okay.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, going back to goal number 1 and talking about history and then the objectives, talking about when big freeways were put in and separating communities and that type of thing. Want to make sure that that is also included in, in any historical content that we can share with everybody, because that is definitely important. What was the other thing? I think I totally blanked. Oh, I listened in on some of the workshops, and I think one of the biggest fears, is that all of this work gets done and then somehow it gets forgotten. And so I just really think that that's an important thing to keep remembering, that make sure that it's not forgotten, and somehow put that in there, so this work is going to continue. Thanks.
Thanks, Jan.
Chair Jennings, we have Director Guerrero with her hand up.
Okay, Director Guerrero, how you doing?
Hi, I'm good, Chair Jennings.
Good.
First off, I'd like to commend the staff for this background and the presentation on how you gathered the information, and then preparing it in a way for us to be able to digest it, both in the PowerPoint and in the document that was prepared in our email distribution list, has been really, really helpful for processing what we're doing and what you're doing. And I know there's a lot of time-intensive work, amidst everything else you're working on. So I really appreciate helping us be able to get to a goal. When as a new SACOG member, I will say that this REI was not included, but I was aware of it. And I will say that the interaction I had with James and the staff, kind of in chunks, not all of it at once, was helpful. So tailoring it to more specifically, my interaction with the rest of the SACOG community and what's, helping me to understand. And even though I know some of you, and I've met you in the SAC Metro Chamber events that were going on, it really does help to meet in person, as we did in the retreat. What did help also, and I don't know how you could possibly incorporate it in your REI presentation, what did help me more was meeting with Debbie directly. Debbie helped me to understand what she's doing in West Sacramento, where are the areas of racial inequity, the gaps, racial disparities, health inequities, things like that. So hearing from your local nonprofit organization that's been doing the work on the ground, in partnership with your presentation, I think would be helpful. So if you can maybe expand when you do a presentation with your board members, or even orientations on what we're moving on in the future to continue this collaborative process, I think would be very helpful.
Great idea. Great idea. And I think we can even expand it to more nonprofits who are doing this kind of work. That could be, we could listen to them as well and have them give the ability to meet with people one-on-one to be able to hear more about some of the inequities and what can be done about it. So great idea. Who else? Lynette?
We've got Director Soon up.
My good friend from Elk Grove.
Thank you, Chair Jennings. I was listening to Director Guerrero's comments, and I just blending it into my initial thought, which was, which objective am I most excited about? And that would be the first one, the goal is just deepening as a board, helping the board deepen their understanding of how race, ethnicity, income, and geography affect social outcomes, et cetera. But while we think about that in a very direct sense, trying to achieve those goals. I don't want us to, I hope we won't overlook just the more, I'll call it gentle way of deepening our understanding, which is through more of just the social events that I'm sure all our communities have. And I was, thinking as folks are talking about here in Elk Grove, we have the Multicultural Festival, which is coming up actually. But I know in South Sacramento, there's a lot of things around Lunar New Year that are done. And a few of us go to those. But I think when you look at the 30 or 33 or 28 member board, there isn't a lot of presence at those. And I just thought maybe all of us can keep in mind or help us advertise to each other when we have that opportunity to announce these events, and that we can collectively make it a point to visit those communities and experience those things. Because I'm going to go way back to the beginning, that I would apologize for joining late, but my word would have been understanding. And I think the better we understand these communities, all our communities, in just a very general sense, I think we establish empathy at that point, and then we can really get into the objectives here that we're trying to achieve. So I'm bringing it back to more of a again, I just call it a gentle way of us to really move the needle. So I hope that made sense.
Yeah, it does. It does make sense. And, my saying is always, those who don't understand their history are destined to repeat it. And so if we can learn our history from, jurisdictions, geographies, cities, counties that are right here, who have events that are going on that can remind us where we've come from and how far we've gotten, but how much further we need to go. If we can do that, that's going to help enrich each and every one of us even more. And so, I'd love to go on that tour with you at any point in time. Please call my number and let me know. And if I can open up my calendar, I'll reach out and grab some others as well, because we need to do more of that. We need to support each other in the areas and jurisdictions that we serve in. So I'd be more than happy to take some time in order to be able to do that, because it's important. So
awesome.
Great point.
Chair Jennings, I don't see any other hands raised from our working group members, but did you want to ask any of the members of the public who are observing if they have any comments?
I am so glad that you said about the public, because the whole meeting long, I have left the public out. And I apologize for that. I mean, I should have asked you 3 or 4 times by now if there's anybody from the public that wanted to speak. And so I just want to make sure we do that. And thank you for reminding me, Lynette.
Sure. I don't see any hands raised, but we can give it a second if you'd like to see if anyone has any comments.
Yeah, and we can go back to our board right now and talk to them, and then at the same time be open to any public comments as well. Just incorporate them in as they come.
Sure.
Okay.
Looks like Director Clark-Kretz has her hand raised.
Yeah, thank you. And Darren, I loved that idea. I really do. And maybe we should incorporate that into our programs, and get some sort of a calendar put out, or somehow have something published so that we can all see that, not just us, but our community-based organization. So everybody can see what's coming up. I think that's a great idea.
Thank you so much, Director Clark-Kretz. I'll remind folks, like when I first got on, even for myself, there were things happening in South Sacramento, like I mentioned, the Lunar Festival, and things that I'm of Chinese descent that I should be going to, but even myself, I wasn't even invited early on. We had not connected, right, those communities, and so I thought about it, it's like, if you don't even know, how can you even go, right? So I gladly, and I know Debbie knows many of that, and Elisa, I know there's many in the Hispanic Chamber as well, that there's so many different festivals here in Sacramento and in Elk Grove that I think everybody will enjoy too. It's a really fun time, but it's a great way to build those connections. So, thanks again.
Yeah, we just got through the month of June with the Juneteenth festivals that would have been great for many to have participated in. And they were, I know in the Sacramento specific area, we had at least 3 or 4 different Juneteenth events for the first time in many years, that many at one time going on. And fortunately, they were on different days, but some of them did fall on the same day. And so we had to go from one to the other, and it was exciting. The food was good, the music was incredible, but the people, the thousands of people who were there learning the rich history of what took place was important as well.
I totally agree, Chair Jennings. Juneteenth, we had former Chief Hahn and Sam Starks at our Juneteenth event, and I learned so much just in those two speaking that day. And so it was a missed opportunity, but we know now, so we'll definitely get on everybody's calendars.
Yeah, and I like the idea of a calendar because, you know, I need to have that. All of us need to have that. We're busy, and we need to have it on a calendar so we can see those things coming up in the different jurisdictions. Lynette, anyone else?
No, I don't see any other hands raised.
And not from the public as well?
No, no hands.
Okay, so before I turn it over to James to kind of give us the next steps, I want to personally thank everyone. Shanice, who's still on the call with us, Eric for talking about our operations, Casey for programs, James for the board practice, and each one of you for giving us the greatest gift that you could ever give anyone, which is the gift of your time. You've given us that today, and I deeply appreciate that. And so I just want to thank you for all that you've done. And James, you can tell by how great the material is that we've looked at today, how much work the staff has put in to getting us to this point. And so, you know, we've heard additional feedback from the board on, you know, that you'll incorporate in this. We know that this is a first draft today, and we will come back and take those comments and incorporate them into the drafts. And like you say, there weren't a lot of dates that were put to this. Maybe we'll start being able to add to the comments, add to the dates, and make this action plan something more inclusive as we go forward. And I just want to say, while I'm thinking about it, that our next meeting dates are September the 30th and November the 18th. So if you don't have those on your calendar, you should mark it down somewhere right now. September the 30th and November the 18th are our next meeting dates. But anyway, I'm really pleased with where we are and the progress that we've made and the work that's been put in it. And Shanice, you knocked it out the park today. I was really excited about all you presented today as far as our listening groups and hearing from our public outreach. And so you really did a nice job. And to still be on the call with us, I deeply appreciate that. So, but anyway, I'm gonna turn it over to James, who's going to give us what our next steps are gonna be. And so we're all clear on where we're going at the next steps. James?
Okay, thank you, Chair Jennings. Just real quick, but it is important to understand where we go next. So we are very open to take more of your feedback, as you know, through the end of August. So we have time. If you want to, if for board members, you want to send this to your staff. I mean, a lot of the staff have seen it. It's circulating, but our external stakeholders, you know, send that around. That would be great. So comments through the end of August. We actually, Chair Jennings, from your direction earlier this week, we're going to have we'll be reporting to our board policy committee, which is the reporting committee for this REI working group. But in September, at the September 15th board meeting, we will use our workshop on racial equity action plans. And so all of you non-board members, our partners, our external stakeholders, welcome to come to that 9:30 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. We are going to do a workshop. We're going to have one of our peer regional agencies come and talk to us about their work around racial equity to get the board warmed up to take on the racial equity action plan for adoption in October. Chair Jennings mentioned September 30th. September 30th since you'll have the final draft in front of you, we'd like to try to do that as an in-person meeting. We'll see where case rates are and everything else, but we would like to do that safely as an in-person hybrid. So you have a hybrid option, but really we think, to several of your comments today, the more we're in person and can see each other and work through this, the better. And then the idea from there, if you approve it September 30th, this would, like the racial equity statement did, go on to the SACOG board in October, would run through the policy committee, which is the referring committee, and then up to the full board in October. And we hope to have ourselves a final racial equity action plan by the end of October. And I do just want to end the meeting. Well, you're going to end the meeting, Chair Jennings, but I just want to end my comments by saying thank you for recognizing all the staff input on this. Shanice's fantastic work in terms of just listening sessions and like counseling and coaching and everything else. But if you heard something during the call today, that's many staffers cheering you on from the sidelines. So really appreciate their efforts and everything they put into this so far, because we have to have everybody at our agency engaged. And as you said, Chair Jennings, we got to get our own agency better before we can, tell other people what to do. That is not our intent. Our intent is to learn. Our intent is to be humble. Our intent is to be more equitable. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, James. Great summary of the day. I just want to make sure before we close this meeting out, and it's been a long day, and I recognize that. And again, I thank you for the gift of time. But before we close it out, I just want to make sure that we've heard from everybody that wanted to say anything about what we've talked about today. So I'm going to open it up for 20 more seconds to see if there are any hands that are raised. Anybody that wants to make a comment? Anybody that knows somebody and you want to go talk to them because you know they have a voice and they want to say something, make sure you talk to them so then you can send those comments to the people we've already mentioned earlier. And so I don't see Lynette saying anything. So with that, I'm going to give you the rest of is today Friday? I'm going to give you the rest of your Friday off at 3:07. We made up a lot of time. We had a 2-hour meeting. We started late and we're only 7 minutes over. So, hey, thank you everybody for being a part of this great. I feel like we're making incredible movement forward. And in my lifetime, I mean, this is really important to me to see this kind of progress. And I'm real proud to be a part of this team at this point in time, making this kind of progress, moving this agenda forward. And I thank each and every one of you for being a part of it as well. Have a great weekend and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Chair Jennings. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.